I'd like to say good day to all those that are joining us for the Lectionary Bible study. These are the 4 texts that we will be dealing with this week that will be addressed during worship on the 19th of July. It seems like we're just running right through the summer, and people seem to be adjusting to the new way of doing church. I wish we could meet in person, but it's pretty obvious to many of the health officials in Bell County in the state of Texas and in the United States that things just seem to be escalating. And so our church is trying to do its part to protect our church members from exposure to COVID-19. Our first lesson today comes from the book of Genesis, chapter 28, beginning with the 10th verse. Now, as you will know, through the summer, if you've been attending these Bible studies, you know that we have been working our way through the book of Genesis, starting basically with Abraham, and we will finish up with Joseph and his brothers. I believe it's a 9-week trip through the book of Genesis, which is a fabulous book. It has wonderful stories and tells us a lot about our antecedents in the faith, so that Jesus will tell stories and Paul will make references to the book of Genesis. It's much quoted in the New Testament. So if you want to understand the Gospels as well as the epistles in the New Testament, it's good to have a working knowledge of Genesis. Now, you know that our friend Jacob, and this story is about Jacob. In fact, he's the only character in this particular story. Jacob has tricked his family, his father, especially in his elder twin brother, out of both the blessing and the birthright that comes to the firstborn. And even though Esau was born just a few minutes, perhaps, before Jacob, he was still considered the firstborn. And when Esau figures out what his little brother has done to him, he is furious and states in chapter 27 that as soon as the old man or his father dies, he is going to fix Jacob and fix him good. And so there's 2 motivations for Jacob running away from his father and from his mother to go to essentially his uncle's house, Uncle Laban. So he makes a dash for it. One reason is because he's afraid for his life. But the text also puts another sort of tantalizing idea in our minds, which is that Jacob is in pursuit of his wife. Now, Esau did something that was not a good thing. He went to his father Ishmael, and he took the daughter of Abraham's son Ishmael and to be his wife, in addition to the other wives that he had. In other words, he married within the family, but not within the direct family, the family of the promise. And so now Jacob is going to his mother's brother's house, and he's going there to find a bride for himself. And so we begin by saying, or reading at verse 10 in chapter 28 of Genesis. Jacob left Beersheba, and that's where his family was located, and went towards Haran, which was a place that Abraham came from generations before. He came to a certain place, and he stayed there for the night because the sun is set. It's very dangerous to travel in the desert at night. It's generally gets cold, and there are wild beasts roaming around for something to eat. And so he camps for the night, and he takes one of the stones of the place, and he put it under his head, and he lay down in that place. And he dreamed that there was a ladder set on the earth, the top of it reaching to heaven, and the angels were ascending and descending on it. So some translations say ladder, and in our hymnal there's a wonderful old hymn. I like it anyway. It's called "We Are Climbing Jacob's Ladder." And the truth is that the word in Hebrew that's translated in the New Revised Standard Version of the Bible, ladder, can also be translated ziggurat. And what a ziggurat is an incline or a slope or like a ramp. And so you could understand it that way too, I suppose. And the Lord stood beside him, that is Jacob, and he said, I am the Lord, the God of Abraham, your father, and the God of Isaac, and the land on which you lie I will give to you and to your offspring, and your offspring will be like the dust of the earth, and you will shall spread abroad to the west and to the east and to the north and to the south. And all of the families of the earth shall be blessed in you and your offspring. And so here is another instance where first the promise was given, the original promise was given to Abraham, then it was given to Isaac, and now it's given to Jacob. And so that is what this story is all about the dream, which in the Bible is often a means of God's revelation to God's people. And so the promise is that he is going to continue in the spirit of his grandfather and his father to be a conduit for the promises of God to the chosen people. Know that I am with you and your offspring, and I will keep you wherever you go, and will bring you back to this land, for I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised you. Then Jacob woke from his sleep, and he said, surely the Lord is in this place, and I did not know it. And he was afraid, and he said, how awesome is this place? This is none other than the house of God, and this is the gate to heaven. So he gets up the next morning, and he erects a pillar or a place to do worship, and he called the place Bethel, and that means house of God. And that's sometimes what we call the church, the house of God. So he sets up this place so that he can worship God there, and he called the place Bethel, the house of God. This is an interesting story, and it's one of two dreams that Jacob will have on this journey, which will take several years, by the way. The second dream is where he wrestles either the man or an angel or God or himself at Peniel, which is by the Jabbok River. And that will happen a few chapters down the road, and we will talk about that story in a few weeks. But this is the first dream. This is the Jacob's ladder dream. And so what you need to know about this is God always has surprises in store for us. If there were 100 people in a room and you picked out somebody who was worthy to accept the promise of God and live it out through the generations, Jacob would probably be in the bottom 10% of the 100 people. He's a conniver. He's a person who supplants. He's a heel, almost literally in the Hebrew. And Jacob means one who grabs or one who, I don't know, takes by the heel is the literal term. Later, After his second dream adventure, his name will be called Israel, and that means he who strives with God and with men or with people. So this person is a big surprise, and I'm sure that the Hebrew people that would hear this story as it was told around campfires or in Sabbath school for the children would have slapped their knees because it was funny that God has such a sense of humor that he would pick someone like Jacob to carry on this particular promise of God. A second thing that we need to understand about this story is the place where it happens. Jacob is completely alone. He's far away from all other people. He's in the middle of the desert, in fact, and this is where the revelation of God takes place. Interestingly enough, when the Satan or the adversary or the devil tempts Jesus, Jesus is in a deserted place, in the desert, in the wilderness. And so oftentimes the wilderness represents for Bible characters a place where people can become more likely to receive or be receptive to the Word of God. And then, of course, there's the promise that is the continuing theme that happens through Genesis. But even when we get to Exodus and the story of the Israelite people escaping from Pharaoh and going into the wilderness themselves for 40 years, the promise is always ahead of the people. The promise is from God, and the promise is a great thing for the people of God. Now, the next text that we're going to deal with is Psalm 139, 1 through 12, and then 23 and 24. I want to look at this text for a minute. It's a wonderful, although quite simple text. It's a text that tells us about God being omniscient, which means that God knows everything about us. Let me read the first few verses of this. It's a prayer, and the superscript says that it's from David, and it begins, "O Lord, you have searched me and known me. You know when I sit down and when I rise up. You discern my thoughts from far away. You search out my path and my lying down, and are acquainted with all of my ways. Even before a word is on my tongue, O Lord, you know it completely. You hem me in behind and before, and you lay your hand upon me. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me. It is so high that I cannot attain it. Where can I go from your spirit? Where can I flee from your presence? If I ascend to heaven, you are there. If I make my bed in Sheol, you are there. If I take the wings of the morning and settle in the farthest limits of the sea, even there your hand shall lead me, and your right hand shall hold me fast." Basically, what this text says in a multitude of ways is you cannot get away from God. Wherever you go, God's Spirit is with those who truly believe in God. God is not only creator, but he is an ever-present reality with all of us. And he will protect us. In a way, this is a prayer for the psalter to God to protect the prayer from his or her enemies. Our enemies come in a wide variety of flavors. Sometimes our enemies that will say untruth about us. Sometimes our enemies try to create problems for us at the workplace or in our families or in the community. Sometimes our enemies try to trick us. People that are those who steal from folks out of their bank account on the World Wide Web. People that try to pull a scam on us because of our age or our naivete. All those kinds of things are circumstances and situations which the enemy will try to get the best of us. And so what this psalm tries to do is to reassure the prayer that no matter how far he goes, no matter how many bad things happen to this person, that God is always there and is never far away. He is inside it and he is wherever he will go next. This, I think, is a good psalm that illustrates Wesley's idea of prevenient grace. And that simply means the grace that runs ahead of us so that where our point of need is, the grace of God is already there to meet us. When I was in seminary and they would talk to us about making pastoral care calls in nursing homes or hospitals, for instance, which of course, for the time being, I can't do right now. But what the teacher would say to us, the professor would remind us that when we go in there to a hospital room, we don't go without the grace and mercy of God. What we do is when we get to that person's room or that person's bedside, is we meet God's grace, which is already present with us. And so what I would like to say for us is that if there's ever a good psalm for us to remember the grace, the mercy, and the peace of God, which passes all human understanding, that this certainly is a psalm for that particular occasion. I'd like to thank everyone for being with us today, and I look forward to seeing you on Friday when we will deal with Romans 8, 12 through 25, and also a parable of Jesus from Matthew 13. So thank you.